So what we're going to do today is, in this session, look at a little bit of CSS and HTML, and then go into Dreamweaver and look at some things in that. So if you're looking at a web page and you're looking at HTML, what you see is that you'll see a lot of these div tags right here. That'll be inside of the HTML. So you always have any type of a tag in HTML. You have an open and a closing tag. And all a div tag does is it makes basically 4 lines. If this was an actual div tag, you wouldn't, the graphics in the actual code itself would be in 2 different places. The graphics would be on the actual page, where the code here, the div tags, would be in the HTML, which would be the code. But the thing is just with div tags, all you'd have is like 4 lines. You'd have no color because there was no color defined. You'd have no width because there was no width or height defined. So what you'd have lines running across the top of your website page that you probably just about couldn't even see. So you have to go and do something in order to reference a div like this in CSS, and give it a color or some type of attribute that's going to say if there's font in there, it's going to be Times New Roman, and it's going to the body, it will be 12 pixels high, and maybe it'll be bold or whatever. It'll be this color. The block will be this color. You add styles like that, even margins and padding. So padding's for the inside. So say you wanted to create a series of divs, and again, they wouldn't be blocks like this. They'd just be lines, and they'd be all compressed together, and you probably wouldn't even be able to really work with them or be able to find them on the page when you looked at the actual web page, because they'd be all, again, up top of the page, and they'd be all, I guess you could say, squished together or whatever. So something like this, I would have maybe this div, it would say, to reference it in the CSS, it would have to have some type of a class. So maybe I would call it div. In this little tag right here, I'd call it div class equals top block. So then I have something I can refer to it to in the CSS. Now I go into the CSS, and what I do is I can do the background color. I can make it actually look like this, which would be a rectangle that has a color and has a width and has a height. So I do the same thing to this one. I'd maybe call it below top block, or block 2, or class equals block 2, or class equals block 3, right inside of that div tag, which you'll be seeing in a minute. So now what I'm going to do is go to, this is what a typical fixed width layout would look like. Fixed width, header, footer. You see these, probably like 90% of the websites are done like this, with the fixed width 960, 2-column, and then the header and the footer. So it would be a page that looks something like this. It's fixed width. So that does not get smaller. If I grab this and pull it over, but I can make it as big as I want to, and it's never going to go out of the center. It'll always be centered, this 960 pixels. And the reason that you're using 960 is because developers have decided that is a width which will accommodate all browsers, and it might not be perfect, but it's the closest to perfect size there is, whether it's a laptop or a big corporate screen. So back to this. Whoop, I don't want to go Dreamweaver yet. Okay, so what you have here, this would be what the HTML looks like for this. You'd see body tags, because the body is, the body of the HTML, where all your body, meaning like where all your content, vital content, or whatever you want to call it is. So the first thing you see is a div class for container, an open one and a closed one. And inside of the container are the other boxes. the header, the sidebar, content, and the footer. I put these all in colors. You wouldn't need to do that. And they all have an opening and a closing tag. The container would be referenced in the CSS, and it would say container, 900 width 960 pixels. You could give it a color, but it's in the back. It's like a house. I'm looking straight at a house, and maybe the footer is the cellar, the content is the living room, the sidebar is the bathroom, and the header is the upstairs attic. But the thing is if the house is total width of the house is maybe 50 feet, then these two together obviously cannot exceed 50 feet, or there's some type of structural problems that you'd have, with anything when you're trying to put, say, 10 pounds into a 5-pound bag or whatever. So the container is what holds everything in place. As you can see, everything's right inside of it. It won't be so evident when you're looking at actual HTML. And then the header was the first block. The second block is the sidebar. When I was actually creating this, the sidebar, and you have to give it in CSS something called float, which makes it go to the right or to the left. So I did float left. Next would be content, and I did float left on that too. And then footer, float left. So it doesn't, there's a possibility it might stay right on the side of the actual content. So what I'm going to do is drop this down a little bit and look at, this is, for your website, you basically have two different parts as far as the code is concerned. And they can be on the same page, or they can be on two different pages. But we're just using the same page. So body, your HTML, and your style. So style open and closed, and your body open and closed. And they both fall within the HTML document if you're having everything on the same page. It isn't actually that complicated. If you're going to have it on two different pages, real simply, you just put a reference of the CSS page right into your HTML. So when the browser opens, it goes and reads the HTML. It sees that it sees the path to make it to the CSS file, and it'll go and open the CSS file. But like I said, hopefully that's not too confusing. But like what I said, we're doing everything right within the same page. We're doing the CSS and the body, the HTML, on the same page. So looking at this, I don't have all of them in there, and I should have put them all in. I didn't put in content. So I didn't put in a container either, which is holding everything in. So there should have been like a dot container, and then width would be 960, and I made the height 1,000, because if I don't make the height 1,000, again, it'll get compressed or squished together or whatever, and it makes it harder to work with. So I just give it a 1,000, and I keep that in mind as I'm making all my other boxes. The height here is 200, the height here is 600, and the height of the footer is 200, which equals 1,000. So I don't get into any troubles. So again, I did the header. See, div class equals header. Here's in the styles. Here's header width 960. I didn't put in a background color, but I did put in a background color on the sidebar. The width 180, background color, and the height should have been 600. Now, if I did the content, the width should have been 780, because 780 and 180 equals 960. And, the footer is basically the same thing as the header except for the background color. So it's as simple as that. It's not all that complicated, really. And Dreamweaver makes it a lot easier to understand. What you have to know is that the header is what's called a selector. Then the width would be a property, and the 960 would be a value. And the property and the value is called the declaration. So notice that you have the property, semicolon, value, colon. Right at that means you can keep like chaining or whatever you want to call it. I could just have width 960 pixels and that's it for this block if I wanted to. But I can keep chaining on properties and values. You know, if I want to put margin, I want to put padding, I want to put text color, background image, anything like that. It can all be added until it gets pretty long, I suppose. So that's it for right now for this. Next is going into Dreamweaver.